Hello and welcome to the CRM Zen Show, where we talk about all things Zoho. This is episode 144. You get an LMS and you get an LMS, recorded on Friday, April 30th, 2021 from Zenatta Consulting. I'm Brett Martin.
And I'm Tyler Colt, and let's get right on into the show.
All righty, we'll start with our announcements and events. We are having two webinars coming up here in the month of May. We've got a special one, which is we're going to be sitting down with LSP. He is a Zoho evangelist. His name is so darn long, but he just goes by the initials LSP. He prefers it that way. And that's going to be May 11th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And we're really going to talk about the enterprise customer experience in Zoho and how that's evolved and where it's going. And then that's going to be not a standard webinar also. This is going to be Tyler and I are just going to have a Q&A. It's going to be an open discussion. If there's more than 5 slides, I'll be surprised. So it's pretty good. Be sure to join that. Get your questions ready. I think it'll be a good little webinar. And then we're doing Zoho Recruit overview and best practices as we roll through our yearly webinar series that we do every single month. We're going to change it up a little bit, Tyler. I want to do one this year. We didn't have on the books CRM Plus. And I think we need to do one on CRM Plus. And I also think we should sneak one in. I don't know if we need to do a webinar on it, but I get asked a lot about the bundles. So I think we also need to do one explaining the 55 different Baskin Robbins flavors of bundles that Zoho has and how that whole pricing works.
And they're always adding more.
Yeah. We're actually building out a Zoho Creator pricing calculator. That I think but man, is it one complicated beast. It's just, hey, should I buy this bundle and then maybe these separate applications by themselves, or should I buy them all separately? It's, anyway, I think we'll have that done hopefully in the next 3-4 months, but it's quite a monster. And then as always, for all the other events, if you head over to CRM Zen, by the way, we completely moved this site from Shopify back over to WordPress. So it's kind of in production right now, but, if you head over there, everything's still here. So we have all our new events and webinars coming up. So there's some in May. There's quite a few from that's being put on by Zoho and others. So head on over to crmzen.com and click on the events tab. And there you will find all thing events. With that, let's get right on into the news. So we've heard about this one for a while. Zoho is introducing not only a new product, but a new brand called Trainer Central. And it's now, you've got early access available to it. You can sign up, I should say, for the beta. I have signed up for the beta, but I have not been accepted yet. I don't know why. But now, we saw this a while ago. And this is, I don't know where they're going with this, but this was Showtime being completely reimagined. But I think maybe there's a change, and Showtime is still going to maybe exist as a little bit of Showtime. But what Zoho's putting together is kind of the ultimate training / webinar platform. And man, the version we saw of this, it's an incredible LMS. You can do live and you can do recorded trainings as well. It's a little different. This is made for trainers, but it's also a full-blown LMS. So now you've got Zoho Learn, which is actually part of Zoho One, and now you're going to have Trainer Central. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? We've kind of talked about it.
Yeah, it's an interesting application. I mean, the nice thing about it is that they're carrying over all the functionality from Showtime, right? The interactivity with any of your trainings, the ability to pass off presenters back and forth. Then they're kind of bundling that in with, like you're mentioning, a full featured LMS, right? Where you've got quizzes you can build, courses you can build. You can take any of your recorded live sessions and make them part of your courses. So they're kind of building this as an application. I mean, if you're doing any trainings as a service, it's going to be a great tool to use. I can imagine a big use case for internal work as well. Especially I could see if you hire kind of in cohorts, right? Or if you're building a new team and you want to like standardize, these 10 people are going to go through these series of training sessions and they're going to complete these courses. A big advantage of that is like, oftentimes when you're doing training, you'll have the webinar platform you're using and then the LMS platform that you're using, and they're kind of separate, right? So maybe you've done a webinar, but then you're downloading that recording, you're bringing it over to the other system, you're uploading it there, right? And this kind of marrying the two together, where it's going to fill both of those roles for you as both, your LMS platform as well as your, webinars. I do think one interesting thing here, the last we heard on this, it's not going to be part of Zoho One. It's kind of one of their new brands that they're launching independently. So something to be aware of if you're kind of checking out this application.
Yeah, this is the URL on this is actually trainercentral.com. It doesn't have, down at the bottom is where you will pick up that it's owned by Zoho. But basically everything sits over at trainercentral.com. And I don't know, we saw this 3 months ago, early alpha stages.
Very early.
And man, it was blown out then. I mean, we were just super impressed by how well thought out it was. So it's going to be interesting. They haven't announced pricing yet. Not sure how this is going to go, but it's quite a nice product.
And
so
one last little kind of cool thing about it is if you are going to use this for like paid trainings, they're not taking any transaction fees. So you'll just be paying your subscription, kind of similar to what they do with Backstage, right? Where they're not taking a cut of your tickets. They're not going to be taking a cut of any of the paid trainings that you do, if that's how you'd like to use the tool.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, and then TeamInbox, which we have yet to, have we deployed this yet?
We played around with it a little bit, but it was right when it came out. So it was very, very early when we first kind of tried this tool out.
Yeah, so now they're allowing you to associate multiple sender addresses with your TeamInbox. I do think we kind of need to dig into it. This is all part of, though, I think to actually effectively use this, we've got to make the full switch to Zoho Mail. We've been playing with that. We're basically been using Zoho Mail as an IMAP client and kind of playing with that. And, we're so, I don't know, Tyler, we're so close. We've migrated to WorkDrive virtually all. We're using pretty much the entire Zoho Office suite now. We're not using any of the Google suite. The last two holdouts are kind of Mail and Calendar. And Calendar's been in beta for a while, the new Calendar, and it's looking better and better. But anyway,
they kind of go together. They kind of go together, though. It's hard to move Mail without also moving Calendar because they're just so tightly integrated back and forth. And, with things like Calendly going into Google Calendar and, if they knock out bookings, meetings, and Zoho Calendar, I think that's our final go signal, right, to move everything. But this is nice. I mean, with talking about TeamInbox, if you're going to have a shared inbox, it's nice to be able to reply from that inbox using a variety of different addresses. A simple example they use here is if you had a marketing inbox, maybe you would want to reply from digital-marketing, US-marketing, EU-marketing. So you're able to just set those up similar to an organization address over in the CRM.
Yeah. Nice little feature. I have a feeling, this product's been out for a while, something probably people are just asking for.
Yep.
All right, we'll move on with the news. This was a relatively slow week, by the way, but still some good stuff here. So Zoho Sprints, the iOS, has added a filter and search on the boards module. So if you are using the iOS app for Zoho Sprints, you can actually do some nice filtering, which is just a small little change, but something that you needed to, especially when you're looking at your overall boards. So
absolutely,
stuff there. Just pointing that one out. And then Zoho Mail kind of put their annual monthly little roundup. This is what's new in Zoho Mail. Part 1 came out yesterday. I was hoping to get part 2 today. We could do this. We have covered a lot of this, but then a lot of it, I noticed just it never really made it as as kind of an announcement before. So some really nice stuff. The restoring tabs is really great. If you don't use Zoho Mail, it's really cool in that you basically have a bunch of open tabs. So you can, when you're reading email, when you're looking at things, so you can kind of click back and forth from one to the other. If you're in the middle of composing an email, it just sits there as an open tab. It doesn't kind of sit over in the drafts. Well, it does both really, but you can now restore the tabs. I imagine it's going to be the standard Command-Shift-T that you can do when you're in a browser. If you guys don't know that, you close a browser window accidentally, Command-Shift-T brings it right back. As a matter of fact, close your entire browser accidentally, Command-Shift-T will bring the whole browser back up with all of the tabs open. So bookmark extensions, you can now edit emails in Writer. Some nice stuff.
Yeah, I like what they're doing as well with the Cliq integrations here. So there's always been a Cliq integration for mail, but they've added on the ability to share attachments, anything that's in one of your streams or bookmarks just directly through Zoho Cliq. Last little thing that's kind of cool is, you can set your status inside of Cliq. Well, now you can set your Cliq status inside of Mail. So if you kind of want to just have everything consolidated, I mean, we just see it more and more. Cliq is just such a backbone product for Zoho that just ties into basically everything across the ecosystem. So always good to see some more done there because, oftentimes I do this all the time, right? I get an email, right? And I want someone to know something about it, right? So I have to forward it to them, grab the subject line, then I'll click them and say, hey, be aware of this, please resolve it quickly. And, it's just, if I could just go from an email and just click it to someone, that just saves me typing and me forgetting to do it.
A ton of time. Yeah. And I love it too. You talk about Cliq. I mean, the whole check-in part, are you available? Are you not? At first I thought I'd never use it. I use it every day. So it's a nice part to see who's around, who's available, who's doing what without having to go look at the calendar as well. So good stuff there. All right. And then Zoho Workerly has revamped their rate rules. So they introduced this last year. Got a lot of feedback saying, hey, we want to have multiple rates for different jobs. And now you have that ability. So basically, they're really honing this down. If you aren't familiar with Zoho Workerly, it's an application to basically manage your hourly contract workers. So 1099s, freelancers, those kind of things. You can have jobs that are available. People can bid on those jobs and come in. You know who's working what they're doing. And of course, you're going to want to have different rules based upon, what type of job it is and what you're doing. So this just kind of continues along that vein. Another one of these applications, we have only played around with it internally so that we can familiarize ourselves, but I don't think we've actually had any client to roll it out for yet.
Not quite yet, no.
And it does sit outside of Zoho 1, which it kind of needs to, because these, people in here, you don't want them part of Zoho 1. So it's a whole different kind of application. But good stuff. Good stuff. It's good to see Workerly continues to have major updates. And then rounding out the news, in a bright spot and a downer, if you haven't been paying attention to the news lately, it's all over the news, is that basically India is in a massive outbreak of COVID-19. And so when COVID first hit, basically Zoho's Chennai office went ahead and they fired up their kitchens, because this bucket you're looking at, if you're watching us on video right now, they call this office building the bucket. They have about 5,000-6,000 people that work. I don't know if they all work in that building, but they've got a lot of people who work there, and they feed a lot of people a day. And so since everybody was working from home, they started feeding the local community. That kind of went away. COVID kind of basically really went down in India, but now it's back up. And so Zoho has fired their kitchens back up, and they are feeding people again. And hopefully this doesn't have to go on for very long. But Sridhar says that they're basically doing 6,000 meals a day, and they're planning on doubling it. So kudos to Zoho. I just kind of want to point that out.
It's just awesome stuff.
It really is. It really is. Great, good stuff there. All right. And that brings us to our implementation of the week. What do we got?
Yes, this is one that our senior developer, Greg, actually built out for use inside of Zoho Desk. And he uses a nice little API call that I kind of wish, similar to something we talked about last show, if we could bring that from Desk to CRM, it'd be pretty great. So basically what we did is we put together a little scheduled function to automate deduplication. So inside of Zoho Desk, you do have the ability under the contacts list to go ahead and manually run a deduplication. It's going to ask you how to find a duplicate using things like last name, email, phone. I think there's an option for email and phone where they have to be the same. But as you know, when you're doing those deduplications, there's tons of other ways to identify a duplicate. You might want to use a combination of multiple fields. You might want to look at phone, but maybe phone numbers are formatted differently. And so you need to strip everything out before we figure out if it's a duplicate or not. So there's kind of a value to pre-processing some data in Deluge before you actually determine if something is or is not a duplicate. And so, Greg kind of bumped into that and realized, we've done this before kind of with a brute force approach in the CRM where, we're grabbing data from a bunch of records, we're updating one primary, and then we're deleting the other records. But over here inside of Desk, they actually have an API call to run that merge that you would be running manually. So we're not having to update and delete. We're actually accessing the merge functionality in the code. So basically what he's doing here is They set up a piece of deluge code that looks on a couple different criteria. It's like a combination of phone, zip code, last name, kind of a variety of different keys that we use to figure out if something is or is not a duplicate. Then what we do is, based on a decision around deciding which contact should be primary. In this case, we use the most recently updated contact as the primary contact. You're basically able to pass like a list of contacts to this function to run the merge and tell it which one's primary. And it basically merges all of the data into that one, giving all the fields that are in the primary contact priority. So if there were two different phone numbers on file, whichever one is primary is just automatically going to keep that phone number. And what we're doing is basically running it on a daily basis on a custom view that looks at contacts that are created or updated within that day. And it just reads through that list, looks for any potential duplicates based on the criteria, and then runs the merge function. I will highlight one little thing with this is if you have this synced from desk to CRM, wouldn't work perfectly because you're going to be syncing back those contacts from CRM. So you kind of need to hit it on both sides to make that really work perfectly in that case. You could likely actually extend this function to look at CRM as well, based on some like reference keys and try to run it in both places, but be a little trickier just because you don't have that pre-baked, merge API call over on the CRM side. But a good one to have, one that's nice to just kind of have running in the background, right, every day to make sure that you're able to identify these contacts. It comes into play a lot when you're reporting on tickets. You might want to know which contacts or which customers are submitting the most tickets. And if those are split between two different versions of a John Smith, well, now neither of them show as high of a ticket count as they would if you didn't have this duplicate. So one last little thing that is nice about this is because you're actually running a merge rather than an update and delete, all of the tickets, all of the history, all gets written to that, now that one primary contact that remains. So it's a nice little tool kind of just have running there, and one that was nice to see. The desk API is just so robust. Being able to actually call that with just a list of contacts is super nice.
And like you say, though, this is just looking at desk contacts. You could you go into the CRM and see if the contact's there in the CRM? If not,
you likely could. The trick would be, making sure that you're lining things up. If you have a duplicate identified, that would mean you couldn't really search on email. So you'd have to find some good search parameters to figure out, which version of John Smith needs to go away in the CRM.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's a pretty powerful function, especially if you're just using desk. And again, it is extendable because Deluge could go over and hit the CRM as well.
Yes, I dream for the day when, at least if you have Zoho One, that we're all on one database. Because it's, for those of you who don't know, basically because Zoho has your 40 different applications in Zoho One, none of them share the same common database. So you end up with delays. You create a contact inside CRM. It's up to 3 hours before it shows up in Zoho Books if you're using Zoho Books. Vice versa, you create it in Books, it's up to 3 hours. It's the same thing with Desk. But with Desk, it's kind of an unknown. We had one client that was just running a whole bunch of metrics on this to test, and it was anywhere from 5 seconds to a day before someone in CRM shows up in Desk or Desk shows up in CRM. And, I think we've created just a ton of workarounds to keep them all in sync and to make sure all the duplicates are gone. But man, if you could just say, if you got Zoho One, then everything's going to write to a centralized database. So many of these issues would go away.
Yeah, and that's what we found. We even bump into this internally where, you might find that you have two versions of a company in CRM and two versions of the company in Books. Well, if you only deduplicate them in one place, then next time it syncs, you're back to having two versions in that. So when you're running any deduplications, you have to kind of run them in all places at the same time to make sure that, once that next sync comes around, you're not going to undo any work that you did. And, it's a result of the fact that I could come in and just buy CRM. I could come in and just buy Books. So they have to be set up to have their own databases. But like you're saying, it sure would be nice if that could get consolidated once you come over. And I guess there are some use cases where maybe you don't want every contact in the CRM over in Books, so I could see some use cases. You don't always want to pull everything in. But man, it would be nice to be able to just query from one place.
Yep. All right, let's move on to this week's read. Actually, going to go back to Raju again. He wrote an article over on Diginomica, which is the Zoho's approach to transnational localism, a small town approach to staffing up. This is kind of this is a continuation of Zoho's new push of, hey, we're going to have these small little offices. People don't have to do these long commutes. And Zoho's kind of doing it. They're basically opening their offices. They opened an office in Mexico, and they did it in Querétaro, which is outside of Mexico City. And, they were able to employ people in this small town. And as they kind of move through and they talk about commute times and remote work areas, it's almost like the perfect storm. If you look at, I think if you look at Zoho's product line and their offering and what they're doing, and then the fact that they are really, really, doubling down on this entire, hey, people don't actually have to drive into work anymore. And I think you're seeing it in the States. There are a lot of companies now that are saying, I mean, it's funny, I watch CNBC and you've got some companies saying, yes, we need our people back in. We're going to have them back in the office. They got to come back in. It's important. But then there are other companies are like, nah, I think we'll just work remotely. Yeah, I think Google announced it for another year.
Well, actually, it's interesting with Google, not to take away from this article, but I think they may have doubled back on that, because I was reading an article earlier today actually about how they were planning on bringing a lot of developers back in September, and they're having a little bit of uproar internally because people just don't want to come back. Especially if you're up in the Bay Area, those commutes are just brutal, horrendous. I mean, just the worst way to start your day, right? So it's interesting. I mean, it'll be cool to see like the employee preferences over time, and if some of these companies that force everyone back end up losing some people if if they can find something remote.
Yeah, and it's they talk about their Texas office. I don't know what the plans are here. I mean, they purchased 350 acres prior to all this, and the plan was to build their new global headquarters, a huge convention facility, a huge training facility. And now that's a farm for the most part that people go out to, and Zoho employees go out and work. But they're talking in Texas, they're using kind of the hub and spoke. So, they did their first office in New Braunfels, Texas last year, which is an hour outside Austin. So if people need to come into the Austin headquarters, they can. And now they're hiring in Bastrop, which is a rural town 40 miles southeast of Austin. So this whole theory of, hey, you know what? We'll just pick these small towns, lower cost of living. People don't have to commute. It's, I think for a lot of businesses, this will work out. And Zoho is really well positioned for this, man. It's
you definitely are.
Good stuff. All right. Takes us over to what's new on Zenatta.com. We have got a blog, 5 features to help you get started with Zoho Recruit. This is, of course, leading up to our Zoho Recruit webinar we're going to be doing this month. And we'll talk about basically everything you need to know about Zoho Recruit, the basic stuff, getting going with it. It is all here. Again, our new long form blogs, and they are really worth checking out. And that is an excellent one. And then we got a case study on Rise Buildings. This is a client we've been working with for years, Tyler.
Yeah, it's been a long journey with these guys. I mean, the case study kind of touches on it, but we've worked on everything from, the lead management, deal flow, contract management, a ton of reporting for them around key revenue metrics, lifetime value, monthly recurring. It's been probably since 2019, I think, that we've been engaged, or, probably mid 2019, give or take. So it's been a great time. They're all great to work with, and it's definitely worth checking out if you head over to the website.
And lastly, we did not find a new guide this week, but we didn't look very hard because Zoho actually published a nice little blog post, which was a quick look at getting started with WorkDrive. And I kind of went through this. We'll probably do a small post on Zenatta that links back to this, so we'll always have access to it and we'll know where it's at. But it's a super quick guide to getting started with WorkDrive, and it looks like something we would write, and it's worth taking a look at. It's good stuff. And I'm loving WorkDrive, baby. I'm loving it.
Me too. And I have to say, I wrote something up in Writer the other day, and I've always been a holdout. We've disagreed on that, where you've always loved it. I've always, I won't say hated it, but just didn't like it as much. It was pretty good. It was pretty good. I don't know what they've changed. It felt a lot better than the last time I had used it, which has probably been, 10 months ago when I actually wrote something long form in there. But getting better and better on some of those like point applications, but WorkDrive is just so nice. I mean, the things we're doing with that now, the minute that someone's a client, we generate their folder, we grab that shared link, we send it out to them. I mean, just the fact that you're able to hit the WorkDrive API from anywhere inside of Zoho is just a game changer.
And it's solid. I mean, I actually like it better than Google Drive, which is just weird to say. But I mean, the ability to tag, the metadata, all the different things you can do, very granular sharing. I mean, there were a lot of issues with that going forward, but and they're continuing. And if you look across the whole suite, it's really interesting. Google's great. Their Office suite's fine, but I don't think they've made a change to it in 5 years. I mean, it is. I haven't seen anything in there that is any different, any improvements, and seeing a lot of great stuff here anyway. Loving me WorkDrive. So here's, if you haven't gone to it yet, good way to get started, and take a look over there. And that brings us to our application of the week, which is one that you're kind of digging lately, easyship.
Yeah, so this is like the point application that we've needed for a long time, to be honest with you. Zoho Inventory is a solid tool in a lot of ways. One of the places where a lot of people end up disliking it is in just how it manages the actual shipping of packages. Up to that point, it's pretty rock solid in the sense that, you can be creating packages with Deluge, you can be doing any of these various things. Once you get to shipping, it just feels a little bit limited. You are able to add like weights and sizes, but it's not doing any automation of grabbing you a proper box size. The workflow to go through and print labels is not ideal. There's no real plugin to like a label printer. So you're having to grab PDFs of these labels and bring them out. So easyship kind of is a new one in the suite that ties into inventory. It is rock solid. So basically the minute that a package is generated, it's available over here inside of easyship. Based on the weights and dimensions of your product, it'll go ahead and assign what it thinks is the best box to use. You can use a variety of USPS, FedEx, and UPS kind of default box sizes. You can also add in your own box sizes. Then you can choose which one should be automatically assigned. So if there are certain USPS boxes that you just don't have in your warehouse, you just turn those off, right? And they'll never be the recommended box to use. From there, it's basically like one click to ship. You basically pick your method and you've got your label. You can do it in mass. You can create custom views based on the SKUs that are in packages. So if different teams are shipping out different products, you just give them a view to use. So far, so good. It seems to be just rock solid. Syncs all your products over as well so that it knows the dimensions and sizes on its end. It's automatically scraping all the best prices. I mean, Zoho does a decent job at the pricing as well, of getting you good label prices, but this does that as well. And then at the end of the day, everything's writing back to Zoho automatically. So things are shipped, they're removed from inventory. You're not having to reconcile anything that you shipped out of the tool.
It's a big one. We've been looking for this for a long time. Something that would really kind of fit this bill. So how long have we been running this client on this now? A couple of weeks?
Just a couple of weeks, yeah.
Yeah, so far beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a good thing. We'll stay on top because this is definitely a solution that's needed. And also does this care then? Can you do it? Will this create a packing slip for you? Because one of the big things in inventory is you can't create a packing slip off of an invoice. It's only got to be off of a sales order. In order to create that. So does this then create its own packing slip for you as well? Does it solve that problem? Yeah, you can do
that as well. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Then it's just going to look at the invoice and do it?
Yes. Well, no, it's still going to run via packages.
Okay.
So depending on your use case, I mean, it's pretty easy to set up that any confirmed sales order just makes a package automatically, right? And then you just carry the rest of the process through easyship.
Excellent. All right. And that brings us to our tip of the week, which is, I think, us rounding off our last beginner's guide. Is this going to be the end of the beginner's guides?
We may have one more on purchase processes inside of books. This one's a little longer than the previous ones, but it basically runs through the common sales process inside of books, right? So creating your estimate, getting it confirmed, converting to your sales order, and then making and sending that invoice out. kind of the end to end of how you would use Zoho Books to sell a product.
All right. And that brings us to our Q&A. What do we have?
Now we have a quick question. Have we done a review of Zoho Commerce? Nothing that we've posted online. We play around with it probably every 6 months. It's good. There are some benefits, the way that it ties into Zoho inventory. Like you can actually pull price lists into, like if you're doing like vendor pricing and things like that, there's some cool tricks you can do with Zoho Commerce. It's not a tool that we use all the time. Generally, we recommend WooCommerce or Shopify, just because, so it's just a little behind in some of the product recommendations and things like that are going to help out on the site.
If you're limited, you don't really have a very complicated store, it will be fine.
Yeah.
And then Randall, yes. Can easyship be used with Zoho Commerce and Zoho Finance? Yeah, because they all go together. So
yeah, they all go to inventory. Yeah, easyship, it plugs into inventory. So that's actually where like the package is generated, and the package is what flows over to easyship to then be shipped. So commerce ties into inventory, and then inventory is part of the finance suite. So you'll be good to go there.
And Books ties into it. And then Kevin's asking, with all the LMS that Zoho are bringing out, which do you recommend?
Depends on the usage.
Yeah.
I would say, how you want to use it.
I think pure LMS right now, Zoho Learn, that's kind of your pure LMS play. The one inside Zoho People, that's only going to work if you want to train your employees. It's only available for them. Backstage,
mostly for live. I mean, you could. It's not quite an LMS though. You're not going to do courses or quizzes through it. Yeah. And then last one is Trainer Central, right? Yeah. Which that's going to be kind of its own bear. That's probably going to be the most full featured out of any of them. So it just depends on what you need. If you wanted to work in like live training sessions, you'd probably want to look at Trainer Central as the primary option. And
you're saying for internal staff, if it's just for internal staff, pure LMS, everybody's part of Zoho One, everybody's in People. It's a great LMS. It's basically
Zoho Learn. It's basically Zoho Learn.
It's Zoho Learn just tied into Zoho People. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's it. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions or comments, please head over to zenatta.com or crmzen.com. You can drop us a line there, or either one of those URLs will work. If you just you can email us using info@.
And on the website is where you'll find complete episodes as well as show notes with links to the stories we discussed today. As always, you can follow us on your favorite social media platform and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, as well as on YouTube. We'll see you next Monday.